Okay, great. Well, we've got a nice cast of characters, familiar names probably to a lot of people in the Chicago group. And we're going to do introductions here in a minute. First, I wanted to give some announcements. First of all, for the Passive House Alliance Chicago chapter, we will have elections coming up here. We have 2 new board candidates, and we're hoping they are going to be able to join us. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. In order to vote, you have to be a member of the chapter, not just a member of the meetup group. So that's a FAIS member. So keep that in mind. And FIAS announcements. If you're signed up for the newsletters from FIAS, we've got some interest, some great. Then you've already got this in your inbox, but there's some really great things coming up. I wanted to tell you about something I'm excited about in April, which is the Mechanical Summit. I guess I say this because I think that mechanical systems are probably the thing that I've learned the most about, sometimes with some painful lumps. So it's going to be 4 days, and you can see on the bottom there, April 19, 20, 21, 22. It's all virtual online. So, and they're gonna kick it off with a Passive Building 101 before that, if you're interested in that. So, so that's coming up in April, and these links, if you're interested, I can get them into the chat. This is a live. I mean, I brought the links into the PowerPoint here. So tonight we want to talk about renovations, as we all know, a big and challenging topic. And I'm going to click back here. I want to introduce the panel. We wanted to do this as mostly a conversation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And we can address them when we get through the kind of introductory stuff. I'm gonna show a few slides at the beginning, just kind of talk about the scale of the problem as I'm seeing it here in Chicago. So first off, Lindsey and Jamie, if you could introduce yourselves. They're with Eco Achievers, and we don't have a slide for them, so I'll just let you talk over this slide.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. And very nice to meet everyone. Very nice to be here with you all. My name's Lindsey Elton. My colleague Jamie Carr is here. We run Eco Achievers. We're a third-party green building rating firm, and we've had the real privilege to be a part of a number of passive house projects through for the last few years, from single family to multifamily and commercial renovation and new. So it's been really interesting to see just how obviously different every project is, and the learning lessons that come along with that, especially when you're dealing with a renovation. So I'm excited to talk to everyone tonight, and just kind of be a part of this conversation and relay the things that we've learned from the rater's perspective, which is very different from the design and builder and everyone else on the team. So thank you for having us. Jamie, do you want to say anything?
I'll just say that in addition to my role at Eco Achievers, my other sort of reason for being on this panel is that Tom designed a sort of deep energy retrofit for the house that I live in now, and I took a leave of absence from Eco Achievers to be the general contractor on that. I have some sort of previous experience doing general contracting work on high-performance single-family homes, so I sort of bring some of the builder's knowledge to our rating team without actually being a builder.
Thank you. All right. I'll pass it on to Scott and April.
April, you can go first.
Got it. All right. So I'm April Hughes of Hpgs, and we're a firm in Chicago that specializes in historic preservation and sustainable design. And we do, at the nexus of both of these two things, a lot of adaptive reuse, civic works like schools and museums, but we also do housing. So I've been in the high performance space for the past couple decades. I've worked on 4 LEED Platinum projects, to net zero, all in Chicago. And I'm the immediate past president of AIA Chicago, which represents about 4,000 members, 3,000 of which are registered architects. And Scott lets me work with him periodically. And when we do, like this recent project we completed together, we'll be talking about a project called the Enel Hpgs project, which is Hpgs certified 2018 as of the past couple months ago, I guess. And we worked on that project together for about 3 years. So we'll be referring to that as we talk today.
Wasn't this just recently published, April? I know I saw it somewhere recently.
It made it into Architect Magazine online so far, but we just sort of launched a PR push on it to talk a lot more about it to a bunch of different outlets.
That's great. Congrats on that.
Thanks.
Definitely. And I'm Scott Fartman. I have an architecture background, but I work out of engineering outfit now. And April's being too nice. It's whenever she lets me on the project, actually. But yeah, you know, we gave a presentation on this project to this group in November 2019. Doesn't feel like that long ago, but yeah, since then it's been certified. We got through all of the challenges, and we don't have too much new data to share, but just, you know, more lessons learned, and happy to discuss it in further detail.
Great. And finally, we have Neil Peck, who's a builder, SN Peck. You want to introduce yourself in this project, Neil?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom. It's a great pleasure to be on here, and actually, I'm on here with Tom. With Tony, who was essential in the design of this project when he was at Fire Associates. So this is, and we'll be talking about this a little further. You know, we can.
No, I'm in.
We can see how it was a 3 flat prior, and then down in the right hand corner in the pictures is, and on the right hand side is the final product and so forth. So it was a great project, and one that I'll be happy to. I'm looking forward to talking about.
Super. Thanks, Neil. All right. I wanted to just sort of say a few things about as I'm seeing it, the scale of the problem, and offer a little bit of insight from a energy modeling standpoint, kind of set the stage here a little bit. I went onto the City of Chicago website. You can get residential energy use data. And it's kind of interesting when you dig into it. What I realized is in 2010, or what I found in 2010, there was about 4.2 billion kilowatt hours of electricity used in about 695 million therms. And if you convert therms to kilowatt hours, you get a total kilowatt hour equivalent. And so I was kind of curious, what is our current consumption like, and how does that compare to where we want to be? So first question I said was like, all right, well, let's look at what Hughes talks about as a source energy limit. Now this kilowatt hours per person is site energy, not source. So I'm realizing that my math here is actually incorrect. But you can see what we're talking about is getting a massive reduction in electricity. And yet what we're doing is we're moving towards electrification. We're electrifying our cars. So instead of fueling them at a gas station, we'll be fueling them at our homes and at charging stations. And so it's a big step down. If you just looked at it as site energy, that was a 63% reduction. And that's a lot. If you look at it in terms of the Paris Accord or some other standards that we're looking towards, like the 2030 challenge, Paris Accord is talking about 80% emissions reduction by 2050 and 0 by 2100. The 2030 challenge is 0 carbon buildings by 2030. So I kind of crunched some numbers here, and I'm looking at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency or Planning Agency, and their count is about 3.37 million housing units in Chicago area. And if we need to retrofit a lot of those. I mean, some of them will be replaced, but if we have, let's say, 2 million that we want to retrofit, well, that's 222,000 a year if we want to retrofit these and try to make the 2030 challenge, right? So that's about 609 a day or 25 per minute. It's kind of staggering what we've got ahead of us here. If we stretch it out to 2050, well, we're talking about only 189 of these a day. We got a lot of work to do, and it's got to happen fast, and it's got to scale up fast. So, you know, here's 189. Imagine doing that many in a day. So how are we going to do it? Well, I mean, that's what's going to be interesting, I think, is what we see if there's like an energy sprung robotic that comes out, people to mute if they're not muted. But just from an energy modeling standpoint, you're saying, well, can we do 60, 70, 80% reduction? Can we do what Architecture 2030 is trying to do? And let me show you some modeling on this house in Chicago that we did in 2019. You know, like most houses, it's not insulated. It was a wreck inside. And so the owner said, we're going to gut this. And so I said, okay. I mean, they weren't even coming to us looking to go, you know, super low carbon or zero energy. But when they told us that they knew they wanted a gut because it was a wreck inside, we were like, all right, great, we'll insulate everything. They wanted to drop the basement floor. So we said, great, we'll insulate the underneath the slab and create a thermal break at the walls. So it was a great opportunity to just inject a bunch of conservation. So here we are starting with a 96 EUI. And this is pretty great. You know, we like to use the energy modeling to look at not just EUI and total energy consumption, but where the energy is going. Obviously, it's all in heating here. But also, what is the furnace size? You know, this is like a 9-ton, an 8-ton system to heat this 2-flat. So what do? Well, you put insulation all around all sides of it, and you cut the energy down by about 68%. We're using Woofy Passive for energy modeling. We went from an assumption of 10 air changes per hour starting leakiness to 2 air changes an hour once you get done. So not even passive house. We're just saying if we're doing like low hanging fruit here, you know, what does it look like from an energy standpoint? The furnace size went from 110,000 BTU hour to 24.8. Now, Woofy Passive does underestimate that. So we probably wind up with, let's say, a 3-ton, but that's less than half the size of the 8-ton that we needed before. So that's like step one, right? Insulate, and then change out the mechanical systems to all electric and get a ventilation system in there. You know, we're gonna make this airtight. We need good ventilation. So that drops the EUI even farther, but it makes it more expensive to run because gas is so dang cheap. So you put a little solar on it and you're down here at an EUI of less than 9. And you know, you can get to 0 if you make a little solar garage. We calculated we need another 19 panels, which we could have gotten on a garage if we rebuilt it. So so that's kind of what we're seeing, is that it's totally doable. When we look at the energy modeling, though, we are running up against heating limits as a challenge to get to full passive house certification. That's supposed to say, how do we scale it up, not scape it up. Don't ask what that's supposed to mean. So that's kind of where we're seeing the energy modeling come in. And so that's just a little kind of background on the scale of it. I want to keep these questions off on the side and stop sharing my screen so we can have kind of gallery, so I can have gallery view here and see people. But these are some of the questions we're looking at, you know, the general questions about passive houses and approach, specific questions about how did you do your air barrier and insulation. And if you have more questions, like I said, please go ahead and and throw them in the chat, and we'll see what we can get to here in the next 40 minutes or so before we jump off to Passive House Accelerator's anniversary. So let me stop sharing and get this up here on the gallery. And I'd like to kind of lead off, if I could, with a question to the panel. Whoever wants to jump on this, starting kind of at the top of that there, is that, you know, what do you think about the viability of the Passive House approach as a retrofit strategy? Who wants to jump on that? April, maybe? You guys did it. You're certified.
Yeah, I'll jump on that grenade. This is difficult. I'm not going to lie. And we're the first FIAS certified renovation in the city. And I think the tenets of FIAS are important: air tightness, continuous exterior insulation, a focus on electric utilities, net zero ready. But those things, they need to be codified. They need to be the baseline. And where we go from there, I'm not sure, but you outlined exactly what would have to happen to get to the goals that we've already set. And there are a lot of barriers in the way. So I don't know if, I will say this, I don't know if FIAS as a package, you're never gonna supply that to the market and have a bunch of FIAS homes take over Chicago in the millions, but you can take the tenets of those and bring up the baseline for everyone. And I think that's what's really important to garner from FIAS. Yeah.
Some great follow-up points there. I'd love to jump on, especially about the barriers. But maybe before we do, Lindsey or Jamie, do you have any insight into that from the Raiders' perspective?
Yes, I think I piggyback off of what April is saying. I think one of the big things is, and what's core, is that those who are getting us to, like, taking us from design to actual construction are not used to this as a whole. So we don't have a huge plethora of builders who are used to taking an existing building and all of the intricacies and things that you don't know about the building and getting Energy Star certification, zero energy ready indoor air, you know, and having such control on all different levels, which is what you need for the certification. So I think that's a big thing, having the trades understand what needs to happen in order to get your air sealing to a point where you can achieve 0.06 or 0.05 CFM per envelope enclosure, when we have a hard time hitting 5 ACH or 4 ACH for the state code. So that's a huge barrier in jumping to that level of understanding. I mean, it's the whole team. So I think that that's a core piece of it, that the trades need to be supported more, you know, and elevated or whatever it is, so that the jump from doing what their normal everyday project is to a passive house isn't so huge, and they can start tackling more projects and we can start doing this more. And that's, I think that's also on us. It's us educating, it's us supporting, it's, you know, it's not just them elevating their skills, but how can we be a part of that, because that's key.
You know, I'm curious, you as a Raider and Neil, you as a builder, first of all, what do you think of that as a builder? But the other question I've been curious about is, are any code officials in Illinois enforcing the IECC air tightness inspections? And what about the trades, Neil?
Well, I think those are two excellent points to be made. You know, I've been remodeling almost 50 years. So the complexity of FIAS in, you know, in achieving air tightness and the mechanical systems and insulation systems and so forth is definitely a learning process for the trades and for builders too. I mean, for myself, you know, in the Lakeview project that we just finished in the last year. So there was, you know, and making sure that the air barriers and everything was done well and in the right sequence with, you know, with our own trades and with our own employees. So it's a challenge, but I intellectually, I don't find it a huge challenge any more than a difficult, complex remodel where you've got complex millwork and complex stonework and complex tile work. You know, I've done some incredibly much more difficult on finishes projects than I have with a FIAS project. So intellectually, there's that. But it's a learning curve for our whole industry. And another thing is FIAS standards are costly. I mean, there are costs involved. And so having the right customer is key. Without that, I mean, if you want to put a house up for spec, you know, that's one thing. But if you have you need the right customer to make sure that they're willing to commit to what it takes in order to do this. And also, to be honest with you, every remodel project is slightly different than the next one because you're dealing with site conditions. Your site conditions are going to can be challenging. The structure of whatever the existing structure can be challenging. The house we had was balloon framed from the turn of the century. So we had air sealing problems and so forth. And that was one of the biggest challenges in the whole remodeling process was achieving the air tightness. You know, we got to 0.04, but let me tell you, it took commitment on our part, or otherwise we would have never made it. So I think it's very doable. I get excited. In fact, I'm involved with I don't know if FIAS wants to get involved with, but I'm involved with the Rocky Mountain Institute and the Midwest Decarb Coalition to bring FIAS type energy building science standards to rural community down in Pembroke, down in Kankakee County in Pembroke. And we're going to be doing a pilot program and trying to raise the energy standards using heat pumps, electric heat pumps that the Rocky Mountain Institute is funding and wants to use, but dealing with rural poverty. I mean, we're talking houses that are, you know, that are not in Lincoln Park. So it's and trailers and so forth. So that's but the principles are the same. So that is key. And I think building science principles are key to FIAS and key to construction going forward. I don't see it any other way.
Hey, Tom, we had a question from the audience asking to clarify what is meant by the barriers. And I also have a follow-up question for you, Neil. This is Tony. In terms of the air barrier, was that Neil Peck guys that were doing it? Was that your crews, or was that a subcontractor? In either case, what kind of training have you done on this project or over the years?
Well,
you're getting what you need.
We used a waterproofing air barrier on the outside of WR Meadows air shield that you specified, Tony. No, we did it ourselves. We did all of the framing details were quite complex with balloon frame walls, and then we had an interior wall, and then you had we had a rain screen on the outside, and we could not sub that. Originally, I was going to sub it to a framing contractor, and there was no way he was going to get anything right. So we ended up, I did it with my own crews, and you know, we walked through the details and the sequencing of it. We spent some time in some meetings, and it wasn't that. I mean, they understood it.
I can address
You know-
some of the barriers, hurdles, if you'd like me to jump in.
But I didn't subcontract it.
So just to clarify terms, yeah, we were talking about barriers to adoption of FIAS on renovations, but also we're talking about air barriers. So, and I think the air barrier is a barrier to adoption on renovation projects because it's hard to connect framing to foundation and you know, wall to roof. There's some places where the geometry can get challenging. I'm just undertaking it on my house here, starting in the next month or so, and I keep like visualizing these a couple of really funky corners that you know, we've got the fallback of aero barrier, which probably most people here have heard about. We don't really want to bring aero barrier in and spray our house full of sticky stuff. I'm just, you know, what am I going to do? Move everything out or try to cover absolutely everything with the tarp? But you know, if it's what I got to do, that's what I got to do. But yeah, so you know, we're talking a little bit about kind of some of the things that are difficult, you know, expense and getting a continuous air barrier. I'd like to not just talk about kind of what's hard here, but also, you know, what are the good things that we get out of this? But I'd like to actually frame this question in a way. We were kind of discussing this as a panel in the beginning, which is, you know, are there really like prerequisites, things that you absolutely should do when you're attacking a deep energy retrofit? Or to put it another way, is there a particular order that you should do things in if you're going to phase it? Because I think the reality is that most of us are going to do these kind of piecemeal over time. So I'd like to open that up. Maybe, I don't know, Jamie, you did it on your house, but you did it all in one go. You and Lindsey, have you seen like phased projects, or you guys typically brought in just because it's all one go? What are your thoughts on that?
Jamie, do you want to start that one off?
We're typically brought in when it's all one go. I think the phased question is a really challenging question, and one that really is worth thinking about more and thinking about really carefully. A sort of slightly different point that I've been sort of thinking about, as everyone else has been talking, that I want to make, and then we maybe come back to that point, is that and April sort of brought this up initially. There are a lot of really great things about FIAS: the focus on continuous air barriers, the focus on continuous insulation, the focus on high efficiency mechanicals, the focus on ventilation, and the focus on quality control. I think the role of the rater in making sure that all the systems are functioning properly is key. And as a personal homeowner, I found that this project, my home wasn't certified FIAS, but I found that it was actually cheaper because of the incentives in the marketplace with solar to just add more solar to get to net zero energy than it was to implement those last few details that would have been required by FIAS to get FIAS certification. Like, you look at the cost of, you can add some more solar, or you can do these details that in new construction probably would have been cost effective, but in the rehab context just weren't as cost effective. And solar ended up just being a cheaper way to get to the goal. But, you know, because I work with a rating company, we did a lot of the testing and verification that we would have done as a FIAS project. And I think that brings value to the project and, you know, makes for comfortable and sort of efficient home.
Tom, you brought up a good point when we were discussing internally, and I want to resonate that there's a train of thought that's probably theoretical, which says do all your insulation, your envelope first. So when you make your mechanical HVAC decision selections, et cetera, you're sizing to the actual load of the building. But in reality, or when you get into it, that's much harder to do. And it might be easier to replace your furnace because it just blew up or, broke with a heat pump. And then how do you size it? Are you sizing it for maybe a future phase of envelope renovations, or do you size it for the way it is now and hope for the best? The same could be said for hot water, anything. So there's like the perfect world, how would you do it? And then there's the practical approach where if you're renovating your own home or helping someone renovate their own home, you gotta come at it realistically, and you never really know. It's not gonna really work the way you planned, I would say, ever.
Yeah, I think between what you and Jamie just said, there's some interesting ideas there, which I'm curious what you all think. If we agree that the tenets of passive house, airtightness, insulation, ventilation, energy efficiency, and appliances and lighting are all important, but we have challenges with retrofits. And as Neil said, every one of them is different. I mean, I think once we've done 100 of these or 100,000 of these, let's be ambitious, no little plans. We'll see that there's a case study. There's like 4 different basic anatomies, Your 2 flats and 3 flats are like this. Your bungalows are like this. Your framed Victorians are like this, and so on. But each one will have a little tweak, a little difference here and there. You can't touch this roof, or the walls here have already been done. But anyway, so I think eventually we'll sort of get to typology is what I'm hoping. But my kind of personal agenda here, which I'd love to hear from you, is how could FIAS support this kind of work, even if we're not going to that level? I mean, is it the building science review? Is it energy modeling? Is it third-party rating, like what they're doing with the prescriptive path now? You're still going to need a rater because, as Jamie said, the quality control in construction is key. If you don't test and verify, it's just an idea on paper. There's a lot there. Somebody jump in. What can FIAS do is kind of what I'm asking. What do you think?
I'll say something to that, Tom. And this would be up to FIAS. Now, I mean, you could say you could have a project that is FIAS certified, or you could, and I don't know how one would classify this, but one could say you could meet, 1 air change per hour instead of 0.05. Have a lesser standard that would maybe be in line with FIAS and building science standards, but you wouldn't achieve, say, FIAS light. I'm just making up stuff here, but it's a possible, because to be honest with you, if we're going to be net zero by 2050, we're all not going to be, not every project, not every house is going to have 0.05 air changes. That is not going to happen in order for us to reach that, come close to that goal by 2050. Back in 2008, 2009, I became a weatherization contractor for the U.S. Department of Energy's program of weatherization, because all of a sudden we didn't have any clients, in 2008, 2009, and we were looking for it. And that program was excellent because they followed building science standards. And we learned a great deal in that. And we ended up doing weatherizing about 70, 80 houses in the city of Chicago, and tried to reduce their energy use by, our goal was 30%. We basically achieved 25%. So, you know, but we're using building science, tightening up the house, making sure that the furnaces weren't, you know, killing the people with carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. And then, but we didn't get involved with solar. We didn't get involved with heat pumps or any of that kind of stuff. But the goal was 30% reduction in energy costs. And these were primarily for the people to qualify had to, they were below the poverty level, you know? So it was a way to reduce their costs. So I think, you know, I don't know, but I think there is maybe a 50 or 75%, some sort of category that could be worked on to help achieve, you know, some of the goals, you know, the 2030, 2050 goals, because you're not going to do 200 houses a day in the city of Chicago. You're lucky to get one a year, or, you know, or or maybe 10 if we were lucky at this point.
Well,
but
let me.
It's something to strive for.
You're getting 25% reductions in the weatherization program partly because people weren't moving out, right? Right.
And also, let me tell you, they gave you a $5,200 budget to achieve that. $5,200. That was the most you could get paid, period, per unit. You try to do that in $5,200. That's why we got out.
Hey, Tom, there's a good question in the chat about policy being a big barrier. Can I jump on that for a second and add on too?
Yeah, let's talk about policy. Absolutely. You want to lead it off, Scott?
Sure. And this also goes back to, Tom, what you were asking, is there something FIAS could do to help more houses get FIAS certified? And I think advocacy and policy with the city, if we're talking specifically Chicago, is something to look at. There's a ton of existing buildings that are built either exactly to the lot setback limits or are non-conforming as they stand now. So it's incredibly difficult for those projects to then come in and do exterior insulation, which is, as we all know, the best way to get continuous. If we really want to incentivize and make it easier for people to build, let's just say high performance buildings or high performance residential homes, that to me seems like a good area to focus on, is how could the city help us get there?
I think another area that the city can help and the state can help, and this was kind of brought up earlier on, is just start with like broad scale enforcement of the energy code. Like get all buildings at least up to the energy code. Have the city of Chicago do the blower door testing. You know, we had talked about, there was some conversation in the chat about this, that other municipalities and Chicagoland municipalities are doing it. It's not a universal adoption, and the code does a good job at getting us to a certain standard, sea level, to then go up. So I think that that's also, an enforcement. Like we have some of the plans on the books, get it enforced, and get people to work by doing some of that enforcement. There's weatherization that can be done. There's new construction. There's green jobs in this. So I think that, and again, to my point earlier, that'll also get the trades used to building to a certain capacity, everyone building to a certain capacity. So I think that's key in it as well.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been thinking for a while that as codes go up and enforcement gets more stringent, you have, I'm sure, a lot of builders who are left having to educate themselves, what do I need to do to be ready for a blower door? What's a blower door? Yeah, I mean, and so, I think that this is where another place FIAS could come in, is just with more training. And I don't know if that's the DOE, if it's Fias as well, you know, there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be gained, and it's like all hands on deck as far as I'm concerned. And so somehow you can't just put it on the builders necessarily. Okay, go train all your guys. You know, I mean, that's pretty harsh, and I know, you know, it's going to cost money, and it's going to. So I don't know if we're going to fund something that we kind of need to go there. Joe,
Yeah, so I was a fly on the wall for the International Builders Show. They did their online, you know, they did their conference online. It was a little bit of a fiasco. They had extensive technical difficulties, but anyway, I was in one of like a panel discussion about energy codes, and I was, you know, curious to hear where it was going for 2021. It was a guy from Michigan talking. He throws out there that, hey, the one of the big changes with the 2021 IECC is they're going to be putting on, or they're going to require continuous exterior insulation on even on a 2x6 wall, right? So a lot of guys didn't want to do exterior insulation, so they went to 2x6. Now, even with the 2x6, you're looking at an inch. If you're still sticking with 2x4, you're going to be doing 2 inches. And oh man, did you hear harumph? And you know, why are they making us do this? And we're building these things way more energy efficient than any of the housing stock that's out there right now. And why there's not much more juice that they can squeeze out of this lemon. I mean, you know, and then it was pointing the finger at, like, what about existing homes? Existing homes ought to do it. Existing homes are really the problem, you know, and so we actually might have the new home builders in their efforts to push back on the IECC, redirecting efforts towards getting the existing housing stock up to snuff. But I think we can all agree none of that is going to have any legs if code enforcement is not educated on what the code is and means. Because to this day, I've got code officials that don't know what a blower door test is. They look at a report and they don't even know what they're looking at.
yeah,
you know,
you
so
know,
it's basic stuff like that.
It's tag teaming onto a nice comment in the chat here from Chris Schwedick, who I think has a pretty good knowledge of codes in Chicago. And question is, who in the building department is interested in advocating for energy conservation? And so I think that points again to, you know, well, one thing Fias could do is train, but one thing that the city could do is bring it from the top down and say, this is important to us. And so it's not just sitting over there in the sustainability department, not getting to the Department of Buildings. So yeah.
This is be a multifaceted effort. You got to get homeowners asking for it. You have to have code officials, you know, being told to enforce it, being educated on what it means to enforce it. Builders, you know, embracing it instead of just kind of doing it, you know, because they have to, because somebody's chasing with a stick, you know. And then you have all, you know, all the trades. They'll do whatever somebody's going to pay them to do, you know. So if people insist on doing things to this, you know, to this extent, they'll do it. Somebody will do it. There's, you know, they got hustle. You know,
I'd like to turn the conversation here. We have 15 minutes left. Towards a related topic. I just would like to hear, since we have a panel here, two things I'm curious about. One, and I have to click my slide so I look at it and remember. Two things I'm curious about. One, you know, we're doing these retrofits partly because we love our old buildings, partly because our old buildings have a lot of embodied energy in them. You know, it doesn't make sense to tear them down. And so I'm wondering if in your projects, the owners who are asking for an energy efficient building were also asking for low carbon materials. Is that entering your design decision making as well? You know, how is that playing into your material selection?
I can take that, Tom. So our project was interesting because we didn't have a homeowner that was pushing us for something. We built something that was speculative to test the market, to see if this was something that could be done on a development side. And so, of course, we considered that in our equation. But at the end of the day, it was like we were trying to build a Fias developer special, something that was slightly above the average home buyer would expect in the market, but something that the average builder could get their hands on. And I thought that what was really interesting about our project, too, at the end of the day, was that we ended up working with a general contracting outfit that didn't have any experience in this. They had done pieces of it over many different projects over time, but never all of it together. And they certainly didn't have any accreditation or certification to work on a Fias project. So I think if we can find a way to move the market at sort of the more like spec level almost, the kind of like, now you can go to Home Depot, I thanks to the USGBC, you know, pushing Forest Stewardship Council, right? Now everything's got the stamp on it when you go over there. Right? That's the kind of push we need. That's what we need Fias to do for the market. It has to be a vehicle. And I was just thinking of this earlier, and I will probably be eviscerated for saying this, but I hope we're not talking about doing Fias homes, right, in like 10, 15 years. Like, I hope that this is the vehicle that moves the policy and the legislation to bring up the baseline so that Fias can do what the USGBC has done too, which is push the market even further in the direction that it needs to go. And right now we're all behind, right? We're trying to catch up. So anyway, that's where I hope to see it go. That's why I kind of don't want to see, right, all these Fias homes. What I want to see is the adoption of bringing up the baseline. So we don't have to play these games to make something energy efficient.
Tom, I'll try to answer that question. I don't know if I can. It was not a major conversation during construction. And also is where do you get that information? How do you know what material has less carbon than another material, you know? So, I mean, obviously, if you're buying oil-based products or, you know, a petroleum-based product, that would be a consideration. And so we tried to stay away from that, you know, and we had, you know, as much, but it was not a major conversation. The major conversation was energy use and whether, you know, we were going to meet FIA standards and that was the major effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom,
yeah.
I was just going to say quickly on our project, it was more of an internal conversation because the requirements of the heating load for Fias for our project, we weren't getting much free heating from the sun because we had a neighbor directly to the south. So we had to hit it from another angle, which is just more insulation, and we're limited with how much we could put in. So we're ultimately forced to go in with foam products, unfortunately. So because of the requirements of something, we had to go with more carbon intensive materials. And I know, you know, we selected a good spray foam with the blowing agent to be good and all that stuff, but it's just interesting that some certain components of a platform or certification could push you towards, you know, more carbon intensive materials just by the way it's.
Yeah, for sure. And we wound up the same place with our Carroll Center renovation for the Park District when that was a recently FIA certified project, which, you know, had a part of it was renovation, part of it was new. But yeah, I mean, on my house, I've just made the pivot. You know, I kind of went assuming that I would wrap my house with EPS on the outside. And then I said, wait a minute, what about Gutex, the wood fiber board? And so I've priced that. I've got an order in with 475 Supply, and I'm happy to say that you guys are probably familiar with Geologic out in Maine. They have a spin-off company. They're going to start making wood fiberboard products here in the U.S. They just shipped their big equipment in from Europe. So I'm not sure. I think it might be 2022 before it's commercially available. But more wood-based products, carbon sequestering products instead of, fossil fuel products. It's started to become so much more in the forefront of everybody's mind. So I wanted to see, there's a couple questions in the chat here about cost. I don't know if finances are something that people are at liberty to discuss. Anybody, April and Scott, do you guys, yours was a development project, so you probably have it. I think you did talk about that in your presentation, is that right?
Yeah, this is another one I get beat up on too.
Yeah.
So because it's a demonstration and it was a very anomalous project, I think, the person that invested in doing this has a development company for sustainable development and I've worked with this person for like the past 12 years and he loves doing demonstration projects. This was a lot next to his net zero home that was being encroached on by potential developers who were going to be infringing on his solar rights. So he snapped up the property. Well, one of the first things that you need to do and understand about speculative development is your pro forma. But when you're already in 500K on the site and the building in the hot Ravenswood neighborhood on the north side of Chicago, you're going to have some challenges. So, when it comes to cost, we looked at doing, basically like a light green renovation, like sort of medium level, and then FIAS. And what we figured out is that in order to sell a 3-bedroom home with even just a finished basement at approximately 3,300 square feet, and that included the basement of conditioned space, in that neighborhood, we would have to sell it around $950,000. These are crazy numbers. No, I don't live in a $950,000 house myself. So that left not a lot to get through making a 3,300 square foot home FIAS, right? So then we said, well, how much would it cost? Well, it's going to be closer to like 600. Well, we don't want to lose 200 grand on the project. So what do we need to do to bring this to market? What we found out is that we could sell it at a much higher price point if we added a 500 square foot addition. So now we're at 3,800 square feet, antithetical to the small home FIAS movement itself, right? That demonstration project. So we ended up selling the property at a $1.5 million price point. It sold on its first showing, crazily, believe it or not. And there was a profit of basically $1,500. It was just profit in name, not really in function. And, the developer wanted to get out of it what he put into it, and he did. But, the question of this for me is that how do we deal with scale when we're doing all of this? And, the scale of the project in square feet, but the scale of the project in financial terms. And so that's something that really has to be figured out at the beginning. And I think the real challenge is to be able to do FIAS at a much smaller scale, replicable, multifamily. That's where you're going to get the change. That's where you're going to get the number of units you need to turn over the housing stock in Chicago. So I'm rambling here.
Multifamily, it's a sweet spot. Yeah. And if people aren't familiar with Energy Sprong, look into it. It's a Dutch program, or originated there. Basically, LiDAR scanning a facade, fabricating an exterior retrofit that can be installed from the outside. As Scott was referring or kind of implying earlier, this is a problem if you're already in your setback. And so this is a policy issue we're going to have to think about taking on. Should exterior insulation be allowed, period, even if you're a non-conforming setback? And that'll get complicated with fire codes and flammable materials. Put your wood fiber board on, or your meltable EPS. Anyways, the Energy Sprong would be potentially a way to scale things up and do things quickly. But a multifamily, you get the benefit of one wall, and that was 6, 10 apartments, what have you. So yeah, I think that's probably the best bang for the buck off the bat. We've got a little less than 5 minutes left here. I was actually meaning to ask a more kind of technically specific question to you all, but I want to, before I do that and use up the rest of the time, is there any topic here that people would like to see hit the floor from the panel or the audience? If not, or while you're thinking about it, I was, you know, we were thinking about, like, you know, what was your air barrier strategy? What was your HVAC strategy? I guess since we only have a few minutes, I'm curious on each of your projects, especially Neil and Scott and April. What was like one of the most difficult things that you had to deal with that you dealt with? Was it, you know, air barrier or mechanical? You know, what was like the toughest nut to crack on the project specifically?
Well, for me, it was reaching the air tightness standard. That was the toughest. We had to end up doing aero sealing in order to achieve it, and we made the mistake in not really challenging and working on that air sealing prior to insulation and prior to after the mechanical and before insulation. And we should have worked on it a little more harder there at that point. The problem is that because of the setback and the tightness of the lot, we had to do one side of the house at a time. So we had to side it, demo, strip off the old siding, demo that, and then sheathe it and then insulate it and everything on one side at a time. So and then you had to side it completely, finish siding it. So there was, and then go to the other side. So because of the site limitations, you know, we were very tight. So,
well, you know, I'm thinking that maybe there should be a sliding scale. Maybe this is something that FIAS could consider, is like, go after your certification, aim for, you know, 0.05 CFM per square foot of envelope area. If you can't make it because of specific things, the rater will identify that, will allow you to get to here, or, you know, what have you. We don't want to make it dangerously leaky, but maybe that's something. Maybe it should be a sliding scale based on site conditions or something, you know, so you don't make people.
Right. We achieved 0.04.
Bravo.
Neil, what were you before aero barrier?
What?
What were you at before aero barrier?
We used that WR Meadows air barrier.
What was your air change rate before aero barrier?
Oh, I was around 0.0, almost 0.1.
I'll resonate that, because similar experiences on the Yanel Passive House. Air sealing was definitely the biggest challenge. The transition from below grade foundation to above grade was problematic. And then working, we didn't live at the house while the builder was there doing stuff. So they did some stuff out of sequence, which made air sealing a little bit harder in that regard. So we did I think 5 or 6 blower door tests prior to even considering aero barrier, and we were in a similar range. We were somewhere in between 2 to 3 times worse than we needed to be to hit the FIAS 0.05. So yeah, it was somewhere in between 2 to 3 times more leaky before aero barrier came out, and they were there for a couple hours and we hit the tightness we needed, and then we confirmed the tightness with the the multi-point blower door after that, and everything was golden. So air sealing seems to be the hardest.
Yeah. All right, well, listen, it's 6 o'clock. I just want to say one more thing. Well, first of all,
sorry, before we go, I just wanted to have say one quick thing. And this isn't in regards to single family, but it could. We've done a few projects that are additions onto existing structures. And like with the Carroll Center that you did, that wasn't problematic, but it is problematic when you have an existing structure that you're not changing whatsoever and you're only testing the new addition. So working with the team, I think that is a big thing to think through. If you have a project that you're just getting certified, like an addition, and working with the existing conditions and how you're going to control an existing part, especially if it's a larger building, that takes a lot of coordination. And when you're talking about air sealing and air barrier details, that's another place where that is a huge challenge.
Yeah, that was we had a school project together, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got photos of that if you want to see it right at the ready.
Yeah. But one thing I wanted to mention, Greenbuilt Home Tour is every year, and I think there's going to be an interesting and exciting sort of deeper dive this year, in which we'll be kind of tackling some of these topics in renovation and in new construction. So I'm sure Katie and IGA will keep us informed on that, because I don't have details to spill yet, but I'm glad we could have this conversation. Thank you very much to the panel for sharing your experience. And gosh, I feel like we could spend a whole 4 days like the mechanical summit talking about this stuff. Let's just try to get some more of these done and documented, and we can share them and build on success. So thanks very much. Thanks, Scott, for your info in the chat there too. All right, we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
See everyone.